The salvage vessel Prometheus drifted through the debris field like a metal ghost, its sensors scanning the wreckage of what had once been the mighty warship Celestial Dawn. David Chen adjusted his helmet's display, watching the holographic readouts flicker across his visor as he maneuvered his EVA suit through the twisted metal and shattered hull plates. "Command, this is Salvage Team Leader. I'm picking up some unusual energy signatures in Section 7, David reported, his voice crackling through the comms. "Copy that, Chen. Investigate but maintain safe distance. That vessel belonged to the Valorian Empire. Their tech can be unpredictable," came the response from his ship. David had heard the stories. The Valorians were one of the galaxy's most feared warrior cultures, their empire spanning dozens of systems. They hadn't been at war with humanity, not officially, but tensions ran high. The Celestial Dawn had been caught in a stellar anomaly 2 weeks ago, torn apart by gravitational forces no ship could withstand. There were no survivors, or so the reports claimed. As he floated deeper into the wreckage, his gloved hand brushed against something that didn't belong among the twisted metal and burnt-out conduits. It was elegant, almost impossibly so, given the destruction surrounding it. A sword, no, not just any sword. The blade seemed to drink in the starlight, its edge so perfect it looked like it could cut through reality itself. The hilt was wrapped in what appeared to be living metal, patterns shifting and flowing across its surface even now, even here in the cold void of space. David had seen Valorian weapons before in museums and military databases, but never one like this. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, suggesting this wasn't just any warrior's blade. He reached out and grasped it carefully. The moment his fingers closed around the hilt, information flooded his helmet's display, not from his ship's computers but from the sword itself. Property of War Matriarch Anavas Torian, first blade of the Celestial Court, guardian of the Seven Gates, champion of. The list went on. David's eyes widened behind his visor. A War Matriarch, the Valorian's highest military rank, reserved for those who had conquered entire systems, and her sword was here, floating in the debris of her ship. Professional ethics warred with practical sense in David's mind. This was military property, cultural heritage, and possibly worth more than his entire salvage company. But as he looked at the blade, at the way it seemed to pulse with an inner light even in death, he knew what he had to do. Some things were too important to end up in a collector's vault or on the black market. "Command, I'm cutting my salvage run short. I found something that needs to be returned." 3 days later, David stood outside the Valorian embassy on Station Kepler 442, the sword wrapped in thermal cloth and secured in a diplomatic container. The station's artificial gravity felt heavy after days in zero-G, and his dress uniform felt uncomfortably formal. He'd never been good at official functions, preferring the solitude of space salvage to the politics of interstellar relations. The embassy's massive doors opened with a hiss, and David was immediately flanked by 2 Valorian guards. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, their armor a blend of ancient tradition and cutting-edge technology. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that bore the elongated crest of predatory birds, and their hands rested on weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. "David Chen, human salvager," one guard announced, their voice modulated by their helmet into something that sounded like thunder rolling across mountains. "You claim to possess something belonging to War Matriarch Anavas Torian." "I do," David replied, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I found it in the wreckage of the Celestial Dawn. I'm here to return it to her family or her people." The guards exchanged a glance that David couldn't interpret. Then, without another word, they escorted him deeper into the embassy. The corridors were decorated with battle standards and holographic displays showing the Valorian Empire's military history, thousands of years of conquest and glory, all leading to this moment of awkward diplomatic courtesy. They entered a vast hall, its ceiling so high it seemed to fade into artificial sky. At the far end, seated on a raised platform, were what David assumed were Valorian dignitaries and military officers. Their armor was less practical than the guards, more ceremonial, adorned with medals and ribbons in colors David didn't recognize. But none of them mattered the moment she walked in. Anna Vastorian was alive. She strode into the hall like a force of nature-given form, her armor still bearing the scars of whatever catastrophe had destroyed her ship. Her face was striking, not beautiful in the conventional human sense, but commanding, with eyes that seemed to measure and judge everything they fell upon. Her hair, the color of molten copper, was bound in intricate warrior's braids that clicked with small metal ornaments commemorating victories David could only imagine. She stopped 10 feet from David, and the entire hall fell silent. "You are the human who found my blade," she stated. It wasn't a question. Her voice carried the weight of absolute authority, but also something else, curiosity perhaps, or wariness. "Yes, War Matriarch," David replied, bowing his head respectfully. He'd researched Valorian customs during the journey. "I found it in the wreckage of your ship. I wanted to return it to you." He opened the diplomatic container with hands that trembled slightly, revealing the sword. The moment the blade was exposed to the air, something extraordinary happened. It began to glow. Not with the cold light of technology, but with a warm, pulsing radiance that seemed to emanate from the metal itself. The patterns on the hilt moved faster, spiraling up the blade like living fire. The light grew brighter, filling the hall with a brilliance that made everyone shield their eyes. Anna's expression shifted from stern authority to something David couldn't quite read: shock, recognition, fear. Around the hall, the Valorian warriors began to step back. Not just stepping back, they were retreating, their hands moving to their weapons not in aggression but in what looked like defensive postures. Some of them dropped to one knee, their heads bowed. Others simply fled, their footsteps echoing through the vast space as they ran. "What?" David started, but Anna raised her hand, silencing him. She approached slowly, her eyes locked on the glowing blade. When she was close enough, she reached out, and David noticed her hand was shaking. This warrior who had conquered systems, who wore her scars like medals, was trembling. Her fingers touched the hilt, and the glow intensified for a heartbeat before stabilizing into a steady, warm light. Anna lifted the sword from the container, and the blade sang, an actual sound, a harmonic that seemed to resonate in David's chest. "In 3,000 years of Valorian history," Anna said softly, her eyes never leaving the blade, "this has only happened twice before." She looked at David then, and he saw something in her eyes that made him understand why her warriors had fled. Not anger, but awe. The blade of Torian judges the worthiness of those who touch it. It has burned the hands of ambitious princes, refused even my own daughter's grasp. But you, a human salvager from a species we barely acknowledge, you carried it across the stars, and it sang for you. David swallowed hard. "I didn't know, it felt wrong to leave it there, wrong to sell it or keep it. It deserved to come home." Anna was quiet for a long moment, the blade's light casting dancing shadows across her face. "You don't understand what you've done, do you? In our culture, when the blade accepts someone outside the bloodline, it means—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "It means the old ways must bend to new truths." She turned to face the remaining warriors and dignitaries in the hall, many of whom were still on their knees. "My people fled because they recognized what this means. The blade has chosen, and the blade is never wrong." She looked back at David. "Tell me, David Chen, what do you know of the human saying, 'Don't judge a book by its cover'?" "It means appearances can be deceiving. That worth isn't determined by how something looks on the outside." "Precisely." Anna held up the still glowing sword. "We Valorians have built our empire on strength, on conquest, on the certainty of our superiority. But this blade, forged by my ancestor 10,000 years ago, blessed by forces we no longer fully understand, tells me that a human who picks through wreckage for a living has a worthiness we failed to see. She knelt then, bringing herself to David's eye level, the sword held between them. You could have kept this, sold it for enough credits to buy a fleet of ships. You could have used it as leverage for political gain. Instead, you brought it back because it was the right thing to do. She smiled, and it transformed her face from stern to radiant. My warriors fled in terror because they realized their war matriarch had been saved by someone they thought beneath their notice. Because the blade's glow is a rebuke to their prejudice and mine. David felt his face flush. I'm nobody special, war matriarch, I'm just good, she interrupted. Just honest. Just exactly what the galaxy needs more of. She stood, the sword still glowing softly in her hands. David Chen, you have my gratitude, and more than that, you have changed something fundamental in how I see your species. The blade does not lie. If it deems you worthy, then humanity deserves more than our dismissal. Over the following weeks, David learned that his simple act of returning a lost sword had consequences he never imagined. The story spread through both human and Valorian space. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges began. And always, the story was told the same way. A human nobody had done what was right, and a weapon of legend had recognized the truth that politics and prejudice had obscured. David returned to salvage work eventually, though now his ship carried a diplomatic seal and his manifest included regular courier runs to Valorian space. Anna had offered him a position in her fleet, but he declined, respectfully, gratefully, but firmly. He was a salvager at heart, comfortable in the quiet of space, in the honest work of recovering what was lost. But on his console, displayed prominently, was a small hologram. It showed a glowing sword and the message Anna had sent him after their meeting. The blade remembers, so shall we. As David guided his ship through another debris field, searching for salvage, he smiled. Sometimes doing the right thing was its own reward. Sometimes it changed the galaxy. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it did both.